It was a Tuesday night in our Dallas duplex when everything shifted. The kind of muggy Texas evening where the AC works overtime and your shirt sticks to your back the moment you step outside. I'd just finished my 4-day rotation at the manufacturing plant, 12-hour shifts running electrical for the new production line, and I was looking forward to a cold beer and maybe catching the Rangers game. But Tessa had other plans. She was in the bedroom, rifling through her closet like she was preparing for a job interview. Black blazer, fitted skirt, heels that cost more than my work boots. The kind of outfit that screamed, "I'm trying to impress someone," and we both knew it wasn't me. "Company networking event," she said without looking up. "Downtown at the Marriott, big clients, potential partnerships, you know how it is." I leaned against the doorframe, still in my work clothes, safety vest draped over my arm. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, the guy who kept. The lights on in half of Dallas, and my own wife was treating me like I couldn't illuminate a closet. Since when do marketing assistants get invited to the big money schmoozing? Her jaw tightened. "Since I started taking my career seriously, Shane. Maybe you should try it sometime." There it was, the tone I'd been hearing more and more lately. Like I was some kind of disappointment she'd settled for. Like my 65 grand a year running electrical systems wasn't enough. Like coming home covered in honest sweat was something to be ashamed of. "I take my work plenty serious," I said, keeping my voice level. "Just wondering why this is the first I'm hearing about it." Tessa grabbed her purse, checked her lipstick in the mirror. "Because I don't need to run every career move past you, Shane. Some of us have ambitions beyond fixing light switches." I let that one hang in the air between us. Fixing light switches. Right, because keeping the machines running that built, half the electronics in this city was just playing with Christmas lights. The woman who couldn't change a burned-out bulb without calling me was lecturing me about electrical work. "What time you planning to be home?" I asked. "Late. These things run long. Don't wait up." She kissed my cheek, the kind of perfunctory peck you'd give a roommate, and headed for the door. I heard her car start up, watched through the window as she drove off in the Honda Civic we'd bought together 3 years back when things were different. When we still talked to each other instead of at each other. I grabbed that beer, settled into my recliner, and did what any suspicious husband would do. I pulled out my phone and started thinking. Tessa's story had more holes than a construction site, but I needed proof, not assumptions. Called my buddy Wesley, who ran the Iron Core gym down near the industrial district. Ex-Marine, built like a brick shithouse, and one of the few guys who understood what it meant to work with your hands for a living. "Shane, brother, what's good?" "Need to ask you something, Wes. You know anything about company events at the Marriott downtown, marketing crowd?" There was a pause. Wesley wasn't the type to pause unless he was choosing his words carefully. "Why you asking?" "Tessa said she's at some networking thing. Just seemed weird, you know? She's never mentioned stuff like that before." Another pause, longer this time. I could practically hear him debating whether to drop the hammer or let me figure it out myself. "Shane, man, I hate to be the one to tell you this, but I saw her last week at Murphy's Tavern. She wasn't alone." My grip tightened on the phone. The beer suddenly tasted like metal. "What do you mean not alone?" "Look, I didn't want to get in your business, but she was pretty cozy with some guy in a suit. BMW keys on the table, talking real close. I almost came over, but what? But she saw me first, gave me this look like I better keep walking, so I did." I thanked Wesley and hung up, sat there in the dark for a while, the beer going warm in my hands, the TV flickering scenes I wasn't really watching. Part of me wanted to drive downtown, cruise past the Marriott, see if her car was really there, but I already knew what I'd find, or, more importantly, what I wouldn't find. Instead, I did something that probably saved my marriage. And by saved, I mean ended it the right way instead of the wrong way. I started planning. See, here's the thing about being an electrician. You learn to think systematically. When a circuit's shorting out, you don't just start ripping wires out of the wall. You trace the problem back to its source. You gather your tools, you make sure you've got the right equipment for the job, and then you fix it permanently. I opened my laptop, started doing some research. Tessa worked for Davidson Real Estate, a mid-size firm, downtown. Their website showed recent promotions, company events, staff directory. No networking event listed for tonight. No Marriott booking in their calendar. But what I did find was interesting. A sales manager named Colton Pierce had recently closed 3 major commercial deals. His photo showed exactly the kind of guy Wesley had described: smooth, polished, the type who'd never worked a day with his hands but somehow convinced people to trust him with their biggest investments. I memorized his face, his car from the company parking lot photos, his typical hangouts from his social media. The man was practically documenting his own affair, posting pictures from Murphy's Tavern, the very place Wesley had seen him with my wife. The next morning, while Tessa slept off whatever she'd been drinking at her networking event, I made 3 phone calls that would change everything. But that's when I realized something that chilled me to the bone about what was really happening in my marriage. The first call was to Wesley at the gym. "I want to start training again," I told him. "Yeah? What brought this on?" "Need to get my head right. You still doing those early morning sessions?" 5 a.m. Monday through Friday. "But Shane, you sure you're ready for what I'm going to put you through? Because I don't do gentle workouts for guys going through midlife crises." I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. Soft around the middle, shoulders that used to fill out my shirts now looking like they were wearing hand-me-downs. When had I stopped being the guy Tessa fell for? When had I become the guy she was embarrassed to be seen with? "I'm ready, Wes. More ready than I've been in years." The second call was to my supervisor at the plant. "Rodriguez, it's Garrett. I want to talk about those electrical contractor certification courses you mentioned. Shane, you serious about this? It's a lot of studying, a lot of weekend classes. Most guys who try it burn out after a month." "Dead serious. What do I need to do?" The third call was the most important one. I dialed the number for Preston and Associates, the law firm that handled my VA loan paperwork when I bought the house. "Preston and Associates, how can I help you?" "I need to speak with Preston about divorce proceedings, specifically about protecting assets acquired through VA benefits." Over the next 6 weeks, I became a man with a mission. Up at 4:30 for the gym, then straight to the plant for my shift. Evenings were spent buried in electrical code books, studying for the contractor exam that would let me start my own business. Tessa barely noticed at first. She was too busy with her own routine, coming home later and later, stories getting more elaborate, client dinners that ran past midnight, weekend seminars in Austin that she just forgot to mention until she was already gone. But by the second month, the changes were getting harder to ignore. My shirt started fitting different, not just smaller, stronger. My handshake got firmer, my posture straighter. When I walked into a room at the plant, conversations stopped. The guys started asking me about workout routines, about contractor licensing, about the business plan I was quietly developing. Wesley noticed first. "Brother, you're not just getting stronger, you're getting dangerous." Dangerous how? Dangerous like a man who's figured out his worth. That's the most dangerous kind of man there is. That's when Tessa started paying attention. At first, it was little things, longer looks when I walked by, her eyes pausing on my arms when I reached for something high. The way she'd suddenly appear in the kitchen when I was making my post-workout protein shake. "You've been working out," she said one evening, watching me pull a fitted t-shirt over my head. "Yeah. Why?" I looked at her, really looked at her. Still beautiful, still the woman I'd married 5 years ago. But there was something different in her eyes now, something calculating, like she was reassessing my market value. "For me," I said simply. She didn't like that answer. I could tell by the way her mouth tightened, the way she turned back to her phone a little too quickly. For 5 years, everything I'd done had been for her approval, her comfort, her happiness. The idea that I might be improving myself for my own satisfaction clearly disturbed her. That weekend, she suggested we go out to dinner. First time in months she'd wanted to spend time together. We went to Papado, sat across from each other at a table for 2, and I watched her try to figure out what was happening to the man she thought she had completely figured out. "You look good," she said, reaching across the table to touch my forearm. "Really good." "Thanks." I didn't pull away, but I didn't lean into it either. Just let her feel the muscle that hadn't been there 2 months ago. "I've been thinking, maybe we should take a vacation, go somewhere nice. Just the 2 of us." I cut into my steak, chewed slowly, took my time answering. The silence made her nervous. Good. "Where were you thinking?" "I don't know, somewhere romantic? Remember how we used to talk about going to Colorado, those mountain cabins?" I remembered. I also remembered her laughing when I'd suggested it 6 months ago, saying we couldn't afford it on an electrician's salary. Now suddenly, with her affair heating up and her husband transforming into someone she didn't recognize, those same mountain cabins seemed like a good investment in damage control. That sounds nice, I said. We could probably swing it once I get my contractor's license. Her smile faltered. Your what? Contractor's license. I'm taking the exam next month, thinking about starting my own electrical business. The look on her face was something I'd never seen before. Not quite. Panic, but close. Like she was watching something slip away and couldn't figure out how to grab it back. Shane, that's a big step. Shouldn't we discuss something like that together? Why? You don't discuss your career moves with me. The words hung between us like a live wire. She opened her mouth to respond, closed it, opened it again. That's different. How? Because... She struggled for an answer that wouldn't reveal too much. Because we're married. We're supposed to make decisions together. I nodded thoughtfully. You're absolutely right, Tessa. We are married, and married people should definitely discuss major life changes with each other. That night, for the first time in months, she initiated sex. Not the perfunctory get-it-over-with kind we'd been having, but the kind from our early days. Intense, desperate, like she was trying to reclaim territory she'd let go of. Afterward, as she lay against my chest, I felt her studying my face in the darkness. But what she didn't know was that I was studying something too. And what I was about to discover would change everything between us forever. 3 weeks later, I passed the contractor exam. Top 15% of my class, which included guys with engineering degrees and decades of experience. The examiner, a grizzled old-timer who'd been in the business since before I was born, shook my hand afterward. Son, you've got the kind of systematic thinking this industry needs. Don't waste it working for someone else. That same night, I got my first independent contract, rewiring a small office building downtown. The property manager, a sharp woman in her 50s, looked over my credentials and nodded approvingly. $12,000 for 2 weeks' work. You deliver on time and under budget, I've got 4 more buildings that need updating. I came home to celebrate, found Tessa in the kitchen with her laptop open, phone pressed to her ear. No, I can't. Tonight, she was saying, voice low and intimate. Shane's here. I know. Maybe tomorrow. She hung up when she saw me, closed the laptop a little too quickly. But not before I caught a glimpse of a text message thread. The name at the top read C with a heart emoji. Who was that? Just work stuff. You know how it is? She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. How did the exam go? Passed. Got my first contract too. I grabbed a beer from the fridge, leaned against the counter. $12,000 for 2 weeks' work. For a split second, I saw genuine excitement on her face. Then something else took over, something that looked almost like resentment. That's great, Shane, really. And this is just the beginning. The property manager mentioned 4 more buildings. She forced another smile, kissed my cheek. I'm proud of you. But she wasn't. I could tell by the way she held herself, the way she avoided eye contact. Success looked good on me, and that made her uncomfortable. Because if I was successful, if I was the kind of man worth respecting, then what did that say about the choices she'd been making? Over the next month, I threw myself into the business with the kind of focus that had made me good at my plant job. But this was different. This was mine. The office building job led to 3 restaurant rewires. The restaurant jobs led to a complete electrical overhaul for a small manufacturing facility. Each client paid better than the last, and more importantly, they all asked for my card to pass along to other business owners. I started keeping detailed records, not just for taxes, but for something else. A picture was forming, and I wanted to make sure I had all the pieces when the time came to put it together. Garrett Electrical Services. Had a nice ring to it. Meanwhile, Tessa's work commitments were becoming more frequent and more elaborate. Thursday night team dinners, Saturday morning, strategy sessions, Sunday afternoon client golf tournaments where spouses weren't invited. Each lie was more creative than the last, and I found myself almost admiring the craftsmanship. Almost. You know, I said one evening as she was getting dressed for another work function. I never realized marketing was such a demanding field. It's competitive, she replied, adjusting her earrings. If you're not willing to put in the extra effort, someone else will. Must be nice having a boss who appreciates that kind of dedication. She paused, meeting my eyes in the mirror. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing, just that my old supervisor at the plant never asked anyone to work weekends. But then again, we were just keeping the lights on, not nearly as important as selling people houses they can't afford. Her face flushed. My job is legitimate, Shane. I never said it wasn't. You implied it. No, what I implied was that your sudden devotion to weekend work is interesting timing. She turned away from the mirror, faced me directly. Timing for what? For right around the same time, I started getting my shit together. The words hung between us like a challenge. She could engage, escalate, have the fight we'd both been avoiding. Or she could retreat behind another lie. She chose the lie. I don't know what you think is happening, but you're wrong. What do I think is happening, Tessa? I don't know, but you're acting paranoid. I nodded slowly. Maybe I am, but you know what's funny about being paranoid? What? Sometimes you're right. That weekend, while Tessa was at her client golf tournament, I did some golf of my own. Drove out to Preston and Associates for a consultation about asset protection in divorce proceedings. Preston was a thin man with calculating eyes who spoke like every word cost him money. Tell me about your financial situation, Mr. Garrett. I laid it out. The house, purchased with a VA loan entirely in my name. The business, which was growing faster than I'd projected. Our joint savings account, which Tessa had access to, but hadn't contributed to in months. Any shared debts? Just her car loan, but that's in her name only. Preston made notes, asked more questions, painted a picture that was clearer than I'd expected. Mr. Garrett, assuming your wife doesn't contest the proceedings, you're looking at a very favorable outcome. The house is protected under your veteran status. Your business is sole proprietorship. The only shared asset is whatever's in that joint account. And if she does contest, then it gets expensive for her. Texas is a community property state, but individual assets acquired through federal programs have special protections. She'd need to prove significant contributions to your business success, which seems unlikely given the timeline you've described. I thanked Preston and drove home. Tessa's car wasn't in the driveway. Wouldn't be for hours, according to her text about the golf tournament running long. That's when I decided it was time to stop gathering intelligence and start confirming what I already knew. I pulled out my phone, opened the location-sharing app Tessa and I had installed for safety purposes. Her phone showed her at Brookhaven Country Club, exactly where she'd said she'd be. Except Brookhaven Country Club didn't host client tournaments on Sundays. I'd called them Friday to check. So I drove to Brookhaven, parked where I could see the main entrance, and waited. 20 minutes later, a familiar Honda Civic pulled out of the lot. But it wasn't alone. Following right behind was a black BMW sedan. I followed them at a distance, keeping 2 cars between us. They drove straight to a residential area I didn't recognize. Pulled into the driveway of a modern townhouse with a BMW already parked in front. Colton Pierce's place, according to the address I'd memorized from his social media. I parked across the street, engine running, and watched my wife of 5 years walk into another man's house like she belonged there. The smart play would have been to drive home, gather my evidence, and let Preston handle the legal side. The smart play would have been to stay cold, stay calculating, stay focused on the end game. But sometimes being smart isn't as satisfying as being right. I knocked on the door exactly 30 minutes later. Long enough for them to get comfortable, not long enough for them to get too comfortable. Colton answered, still in his golf clothes, looking like he'd just stepped out of a country club magazine. When he saw me, his face went through about 5 different expressions before settling on confusion. "Can I help you?" "You must be Colton. I'm Shane, Tessa's husband." Behind him, I heard a sharp intake of breath and the sound of someone moving quickly through the house. "Look, I think there might be some confusion here." "No confusion?" I stepped past him into the entryway. "I know exactly what's going on." Tessa appeared in the doorway between the kitchen and living room, still in her golf outfit, face white as a Texas highway stripe. "Shane, this isn't—" "I can explain." "Can you? Because I'd love to hear the explanation for why my wife is spending her Sunday afternoon at her lover's house instead of the client golf tournament that doesn't exist." Colton cleared his throat. "Maybe I should give you two some privacy." "No, stay." I looked at him, really took him in, soft hands, perfect teeth, the kind of guy who'd never changed his own oil or fixed a leaky faucet. I want to hear this from both of you. Tessa's voice cracked. Shane, please, let's go home. We can talk about this. We can talk here, right now. I walked into the living room, sat down in the leather chair like I owned the place. So, Tessa, tell me about this. Golf tournament. She looked at Colton, then back at me, trapped between two men who both knew she was lying. She swallowed hard. Okay, there was no golf tournament. What was there? We were talking. About what? Another look at Colton. He nodded slightly like he was giving her permission to tell the truth. About us. About what's been happening. I leaned back in the chair, making myself comfortable. And what has been happening, Tessa? We've been seeing each other. The words came out in a rush, like she was ripping off a Band-Aid. For 3 months. Seeing each other. That's a nice way to put it. I looked around the townhouse, taking in the expensive furniture, the art on the walls, the kind of place that screamed 6-figure income. This is a nice place, Colton. Sales business must be good. Look, Shane, I want you to know that I never intended for this to happen. It developed. It developed, like a photograph, or a disease. Tessa stepped forward. Shane, don't be cruel. Cruel? I stood up, walked over to the window, looked out at the perfectly manicured street. Tessa, you've been lying to me for 3 months. You've been sleeping with another man for 3 months. You've been coming home to our bed, our house, our life, and pretending everything was normal for 3 months. And you're worried about me being cruel? She started crying then. Not the manipulative tears I'd seen during arguments, but genuine shame and fear. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Shane. I never wanted to hurt you. But you did anyway. Yes. I turned back to face both of them. Colton was standing protectively near Tessa, like he thought I might get violent. The idea would have been funny if it wasn't so insulting. So, what's the plan here? You two lovebirds going to run off into the sunset together? Colton straightened up. We haven't made any decisions about the future. Sure you have. You just haven't told me about them yet. I walked back to the chair, sat down again. Let me guess. Tessa's going to ask for a divorce. She's going to try to get half the house, half my business, half of everything I've built, and you're going to be there to comfort her through the difficult transition. Neither of them answered, which was answer enough. Here's the thing, though. I've been planning too. Tessa wiped her eyes. Planning what? Planning for exactly this moment. See, I'm not the same guy you married 5 years ago, Tessa. I'm not even the same guy you started cheating on 3 months ago. I've been busy. I pulled out my phone, showed them a photo of the check I'd received from my latest electrical contract, $25,000 for a restaurant chain expansion. That's more than Tessa makes in 8 months, and it's just the beginning. Colton's expression shifted from protective to calculating. What's your point? My point is that I don't need either of you anymore. The house is in my name, bought with a VA loan. The business is mine, built with my skills and my reputation. The truck is mine, paid for with money I earned. I stood up, headed for the door. Tessa, you can stay here tonight. Tomorrow, we'll talk about how this divorce is going to work. Shane, wait. She followed me to the door. Can't we try to work this out? Go to counseling, start over? I looked at her one last time, this woman I'd loved for 7 years, and realized something that surprised me. Tessa, 3 months ago, if you'd asked me that question, I would have said yes. I would have begged you to try. And now I realize you were right about something you said a few weeks ago. What? I'm not good enough for you. Her face crumpled. That's not what I meant. Yes, it was. And you know what? You're absolutely right. But what I realized as I walked back to my truck was something that would make all the difference in how this story ended. I wasn't good enough for someone who would lie to their spouse for 3 months. I wasn't good enough for someone who would build a relationship on betrayal and deception. I wasn't good enough for someone who measured a man's worth by his bank account instead of his character. I was better than that. And it had taken her cheating for me to finally figure it out. The divorce proceedings moved faster than anyone expected, including Preston, who seemed genuinely impressed by how thoroughly I'd documented everything. Your wife's attorney is pushing for a 50-50 split of marital assets, he told me during our final consultation. And what did you tell them? I told them to read Texas Family Code Section 3001 and get back to me with a more realistic proposal. The mediation session was held in a conference room that smelled like stale coffee and broken dreams. Tessa sat across from me with her lawyer, a sharp-dressed woman who clearly charged by the hour and billed for every meaningful glance. My client is seeking equitable distribution of marital assets, the lawyer began, including 50% of the residence and any business interests acquired during the marriage. Preston didn't even open his briefcase. The residence was purchased through a VA loan in Mr. Garrett's name exclusively. Veterans' benefits are protected under federal law from division and divorce proceedings. The business was established post-separation, using Mr. Garrett's individual contractor's license and personal credit. What about spousal support? Tessa's lawyer pressed. Based on what? Your client earns $45,000 a year in a legitimate profession. Mr. Garrett earns comparable wages. Neither party requires support from the other. I watched Tessa's face as the reality settled in. She'd gambled on a future with Colton that looked bright from the outside, but she'd forgotten to calculate what leaving would actually cost her. What about the joint savings? She asked directly, speaking for the first time. You're entitled to half of the $8,000 currently in the account, Preston replied. $4,000. The number hung in the air like a punchline to a joke nobody wanted to laugh at. $4,000 for 5 years of marriage. $4,000 for starting over at 32. That's it? Preston shrugged. Texas is a community property state, but there has to be community property to divide. Your husband was careful to keep his assets separate. After she signed the papers, Tessa waited for me in the parking lot. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by the reality of what she'd chosen. Shane, can we talk? What's left to say? I know you hate me, and I deserve that, but I need you to understand something. I leaned against my truck, the same truck I'd driven when we first met, now paid off and running better than ever, thanks to the maintenance I'd finally started doing myself. I'm listening. I didn't cheat because you weren't enough. I cheated because I was scared of being ordinary, of having an ordinary life with an ordinary man doing ordinary things. And how's that working out for you? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Colton broke up with me last week. Why? Because divorce is messy and expensive and bad for his image. Because I'm not the exciting mistress anymore, I'm just another single woman with baggage. I should have felt satisfaction hearing that. Should have enjoyed watching karma collect its debt with interest. But all I felt was tired. I'm sorry, Tessa. I really am. Are you? Yeah. I want you to be happy. I always did. Even after everything? Especially after everything. Because your unhappiness is what caused all this mess in the first place. 6 months later, Garrett Electrical. Services had grown beyond anything I'd imagined when I started. 3 full-time employees, a waiting list of commercial clients, and a reputation for reliability that had spread throughout the Dallas business community. I'd bought a house. Nothing fancy, but mine. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, and a workshop in the garage where I could repair equipment and train the apprentices I was starting to hire. Wesley and I had become business partners, with me handling all the electrical work for his expanding chain of gyms. We were planning a 4th location, this one with a specialized area for training military veterans transitioning to civilian careers. You know what the difference is between you and most guys going through divorce? Wesley asked me one evening as we reviewed the expansion plans. What's that? Most guys spend their energy trying to hurt their ex-wife. You spent yours trying to help yourself. I thought about that as I drove home to my empty house, past the duplex where Tessa and I had lived together for 5 years. There was a for rent sign in the yard now. She'd moved into a small apartment near her job, started dating again, according to her sister Brooke, who still brought her car to the garage where I got my truck serviced. She asks about you sometimes, Brooke had mentioned recently. What does she ask? If you're happy, if you're seeing anyone, if you ever talk about her. And what do you tell her? I tell her you look like a man who figured out who he was when nobody was watching. That night, as I sat on my back porch with a beer and watched the Texas sky turn from blue to black, I realized something that probably should have been obvious months earlier. Tessa had been right about one thing. I wasn't good enough for her, but not for the reasons she thought. I wasn't good enough to be the kind of man who would settle for someone who didn't value what I brought to the table. I wasn't good enough to Waste my life trying to earn the respect of someone who thought respect was something to be purchased rather than earned. The best revenge isn't getting even with someone who wronged you. The best revenge is becoming the kind of person they could never hurt in the first place. Because when you know your own worth, nobody else's opinion of you matters.